Welcome to another episode of Show and Tell Books. I'm Amber,
And I'm Chantel.
and today we're talking about the things we hate reading in books, our 5 least favorite tropes. I think we should start off strong with the accidental pregnancy that is found in Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. I hate the accidental pregnancy. This one in particular felt like it had no reason to be included in the book at all.
Which, granted, maybe that's a slight spoiler that there is an accidental pregnancy in that book, but I agree. It came out of left field. It didn't add to the plot or their relationship at all. So if it doesn't build on the relationship or help with the plot, why are we adding these tropes? It's dumb.
Well, you were right to say it's a spoiler because it comes at the end of the story, and I think it was in like the second to last chapter, or like it was definitely very late in the book, and it felt like the authors were just like, oh, this is a popular trope, we'll throw it in and call it good.
There's a trend, right? Would a couple stay together after the book is over going around? And I feel like a lot of authors use it as a force continuation of a relationship, which I think is stupid and dumb and should not exist within literature, especially because that is what the accidental pregnancy always ends up doing. Is it takes like two people who are questionable together or have toxic traits with each other and then kind of forces them to stay together because now there's a baby along the way. And I think we shouldn't be romanticizing that within literature because it's not good.
It also was a trope that was included in one of Megan Quinn's books, one of her hockey romance books, and it was Three Little Words, so the second book in the Agitator series, but the accidental pregnancy was at the beginning of the book. And so it's like you talked about, where it kind of forced the characters to build on this non-existent relationship because there all of a sudden is a baby on the way. And like, that's a stressful situation to be in the first place, regardless of your relationship status. And then to force characters to build a relationship that doesn't even exist during that stressful time while you as a woman are experiencing so many different things, carrying a baby, all like, I just am not a fan. That's a part of life that I really don't want to read about.
Which kind of ties into like our second trope that we hate, which is like romanticizing things that should not be romanticized. So for example, like It Ends With Us, that entire book romanticizes abuse. And granted, that book, there's a lot of backlash that it shouldn't be categorized as a romance book, which yes. But I think a big one, for example, is like To Love, Jason Thorne. I genuinely hate that book because it romanticizes a lot of things, including rape within a relationship. And just because you're married or dating someone doesn't mean you can't rape your partner. By now, people should know that I don't like this book. But the whole reason is because literature is super powerful and can alter the way we think. And so we shouldn't be romanticizing things that are not okay, and stop.
Well, and if it's showing up in our literature, it's also showing up in our other forms of media, in music, in television, movies. It's that same instance of like rape can exist in marriage showed up in the first season of Bridgerton, and we saw the backlash that had, yet it's still pervasive in all of our forms of media. And I really wish that it wouldn't be.
So I just finished City of Bones again. And I've read that series, and that series came out forever ago. But that was the first book that kind of popularized the I'm in love with my brother trope. Which obviously, spoiler if you don't know this already, it's from forever ago. But like Jace and Clary are not actually siblings. But that is like another romanticizing thing that should not be romanticized. Incest is not okay. It shouldn't be romanticized. And so that's like, that kind of goes under that bucket as well, of things that as a culture we say no to. And yet movies or books or different forms of media and entertainment romanticize them. So I think as consumers, we just shouldn't. And yeah.
Yeah, if it's a red flag in real life, it's a red flag in books too.
Yes. And that should be that, like, that's it. That should be the goal.
Along that line, we also have obsessive females, which is, again, it's a red flag and it should be left alone. An example of this is basically every female that Tessa Bailey has ever written, or
Yes.
Rosie from the American Roommate Experiment,
Yep.
I Rosie is the one that bugs me the most because she literally heard her best friend talk about her cousin one time and stalked him all over the internet, knew everything she possibly could about him, including his dog's name. Like, a whole new level of unacceptable obsessive behavior, in my opinion.
Well, again, this is the thing. If in real life this is a red flag, and it is, no one likes having a super obsessive significant other. Specifically in romance literature, it's always the girl. I don't know why she's always so obsessive and like annoying, but that is like a continuous trope throughout so many romance books that are currently like on Book Talk and things like that. And it sucks. Like you hate the female character. Like why are we writing females that females hate? Like yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it does bring up the question, we're Swifties. So Taylor's latest album has Mastermind, one of those songs where she talks about like from the moment I saw you, I knew I just had to have you, like I'm a mastermind. Um, but that song still feels slightly different than what we're seeing in this literature, right?
Yes.
So I think
Yes.
it's a good example of how it can exist in a way that's not to the degree where we can't stand reading about it, right? And I think that's the line of these characters become caricatures of women and paint them in a light that is super disrespectful. It instead of adding depth to their character and showing that there's multiple sides and depth, really, it's very surface level of saying, okay, well, her one personality trait is just going to be how she obsesses over this male or how she obsesses over this aspect of a relationship. Like it was one of my biggest gripes with Megan Quinn's latest hockey book is the female main character is thirsty. We'll say that. She knows what she wants. She wants a physical relationship. She's not afraid of talking about it and pursuing it. Um, but I felt like the way that she was written left it very surface level at that, didn't allow for her to progress, didn't allow for the depth to take hold of the story. And it just kind of left you feeling like it's okay for women to have desire, but if we're just going to paint it at that level, it's not a good look.
I think it's just really we hate specifically when like in the opening pages, you're already like this girl or even this guy, right? Is basically a stalker. Or it's kind of like if this happened in real life, I'd be scared for like my safety or the amount of like information someone knows about me going into something. It's that's just what the whole point is, right? If you look at it and you see from the get-go, that is just kind of creepy or weird. I definitely agree, like your thought process of mastermind, I think the intent behind it is different. But with like Tessa Bailey and all of her female characters, I always end up hating simply because their defining characteristic is they're so and so's girlfriend. They're not their own person. They are the sum total of who their significant other is. And I think that is what I don't like about the obsessive female, because you are right. It kind of is disrespectful of a woman's position in a relationship. Well, our fourth biggest gripe when it comes to tropes, people not acting their age. The biggest example I can think of is like the cheat sheet. They're 30 and they act like they are high school teenagers.
I would say Lucy Score is the author that I've read the most books where I think this is the case for every single character she's ever written. They never act their age. I mean, she's got Things We Never Got Over and Things We Hide from the Light are her two big books that everyone's talking about right now. And those characters are supposed to be in their like mid 30s, 40s even, and they act like they're not even 16 in the way that they approach conversations with one another, the entire relationship and how they view the world.
I get like your characters need to reflect the age of your readers, but that means they should be reflecting what your readers are going through and not coming across as teenagers or young 20s who have no idea what life is or how to approach conflict or problems. Like if you are 40 and you still are having like a miscommunication trope, that speaks more to your character than like an actual applicable, realistic, relatable plot.
Yeah. And granted, my husband, when I complain about this to him, he's like, well, is there trauma in their past that would explain this delay in development or this shortcoming that they're experiencing? And I'm like, I mean, if a good author wrote the story, then yes, sometimes there is that trauma that explains the deficit in behavior. But some of these authors don't write the depth to the characters to use that as a plot device or as character development. So I guess that's my one caveat is if they've bothered to like actually develop the character and their backstory enough to justify this behavior, then I find it acceptable. But without that character development, it's like, get this away from me. I don't want to read it.
Which I 100% agree with your husband. Like, we are the sum total of our traumas. If there's something in my past that has made it so it is difficult for me to relate or like have certain conversations, or I am a little bit more immature in my thinking or approach to life, then that makes sense because you can use it as what it is. And that is relatable then. But if as an author, you're not using that or having that as the undertone of your plot, have your characters act their age.
Yeah.
Like, your plots need to be mostly believable.
I'll say this is a plug for why I love Thank You for Listening so much, because she has the example of Swanee not necessarily acting her age in some situations, but it is directly really linked to the traumatic experience in her past. And it's talked about like very blatantly. Her mother and her best friend approach it of like, hey, you need to realize that the way that you're treating us and the way that this situation continues to move forward isn't acceptable. You need to address what's going on so that we can all move forward in a healthy manner.
And that is the way to make it work. If you are going to have this trope, and it exists a lot, then use it correctly, not just as an excuse for basically what could have been a YA book with smut in it.
Yeah.
Because that's what it comes across as is, oh, I have this YA plot, I have this YA character, but I want to add some smut in there. And obviously I don't want to like have teenagers reading this. I want to have like my 30-year-olds that are my same age reading this. So I'm going to make it a YA book with smut as an adult book. That's no, we can be more mature than that.
Yeah. And I think that's also the difference between like YA, new adult, and these romance novels, where I think if they're set in college and they are taking place, you know, in those early 20s, like you talked about earlier, new adult fiction exists. The book is a new adult fiction. Great. But if you're taking similar plots from that time frame of life and just saying, I'm going to age my characters up, it doesn't come off well.
It doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work.
Which brings us to cardboard males.
Why is it that so many romance books right now on Book Talk, on Bookstagram, that are being popularized? Literally, like, you could take the male character out and put him as like a cardboard cutout, and it would be identical. So, like, prime examples of this are Spanish Love Deception and Aaron. He literally is a cardboard cutout. And most Ali Hazelwood books, Stuck With You, which is a tiny novella, but literally that guy he does nothing to the plot, which is so sad because there was so much potential. They basically are stuck in an elevator, and she had like a one night stand with him, and then they had like a miscommunication. And so she hates him, thinks he set her up. And he's just like, why do you hate me? And then that's it. But the entire time, because he's Scandinavian and has that as his like backstory, he's not showing any emotion to it or any depth or plot, or all they are is used as like a prop for smut. And I think that's just really sad.
Yeah. I mean, I think we see this most commonly in one point of view stories. So Spanish Love Deception is only told from Catalina's point of view. All of Ali Hazelwood's books, I think, predominantly have
most of them
one point of view up until like the added scenes in the novellas when they were compiled into one book. Then I think you get the additional points of view. And I think that shows the growth in Ali Hazelwood's storytelling, is that she recognized the shortcoming and tried to add a little bit more depth. And I think in Love on the Brain, she adds kind of a little bit more depth to it by including the male's point of view in the storytelling. But even in that one where it is dual point of view, he still is a cardboard cutout for every other male character she's ever written. So if they're that interchangeable, and I've read all of your work, I can't remember their names. I can't remember their defining characteristics. You supposedly have given them different characteristics, but in my mind, I can't differentiate because it is a cardboard cutout prop for the story instead of an
An
adding.
actual person. Yep.
Yeah.
I think so. There's two parts. One, I think it's also a defining trait, mostly with debut or sophomore novels, because the author is still figuring out their writing style. So I do think like a lot of debut-ish novels tend to have the cardboard cutout trope, or trait, I guess. So dual point of views or multiple POVs within literature are becoming really popular. And I do really like them because you can see like the male's perspective, which, you know, in a previous video, we talked about why American Roommate Experiment with its dual point of view was better than Spanish Love Deception, which only had one point of view. But I also think an author shouldn't use dual point of views within a romantic or contemporary romance book as a crutch to finally show the male side of things. But I think you can show depth within a male character, even if it's just from the female's point of view. So I think of like The Simple Wild, which is all from Cala's point of view. And yet Jonah is a 3D male character who helps her in her growth. Even though you never see technically his side of it or his brain thinking, you still get a three-dimensional male character. And I think that that is what a lot of these tropes or a lot of these books could do, is make them an actual person, flesh them out like you do with your female characters. Even though we like the STEM books, which is what Ali Hazelwood is doing, I know we want to empower women to do STEM, and that is the whole point behind them, and I love them. But I also think simply because it's more of a female-oriented, female-empowered book, you still can have males who help the girl grow. Because that is what a relationship is. That is what happens, is no one wants to date a cardboard cutout who has no personality. Or if you do, props, but most people don't. We want people who actually make us think and who challenge us and who help us grow. And I think that is the depth that is missing or lacking with a lot of these books that have simply just like a male character. I actually really loved what you said, Amber, that you could literally exchange any of these characters with any character from any other books. Like Aaron from Spanish Love Deception could probably be exchanged with Adam, and they even have similar names. You could probably exchange them and the storyline would still more or less be the same. And I think that is what's sad, is there's nothing really that they are bringing to the table as themselves. They are just being used as a prop to help the female's plot to move along. And it's just sad.
I loved what you brought up with including a discussion on how Kay Tucker did it well with Jonah. And it is because she had Calla observe Jonah in his daily life, see what he did as a job in his free time, like had them banter, had them argue. Like it provided this depth that made him believable. Like you could potentially meet this man on the streets in Alaska or whatever, right? And I think that it's a very valid point you brought up of these debut authors don't take the time to really flesh out the characters, because I think that there were so many times in Olive and Adam's interactions, like their Wednesday coffee meetings, where she could have, as an author, had them discuss something that added more depth to Adam. So you thought, oh, like this is what he was like when he was a grad student, like Olive, or he likes playing frisbee, or he likes running. We kind of know those things about him through weird interactions, but it could have been fleshed out more in conversations that were there, just very surface level. Like, we know he's a runner. Does he run races? How many races has he run? Like, I fill in these gaps as a reader because I want to like Adam more than the material allows me to.
you can't create a fandom if the people don't love the characters. And these authors aren't giving us enough, especially with the male characters, to love them and root for them and want them to succeed simply because we don't know them. Like we know the females and we love the females and we root for them, which is why, like, with, for example, Ali Hazelwood, she ended up getting multiple contracts for different books is because we love her female characters and the concept of the STEM plot and all of that. But it's really tough because with her male characters, I don't even remember their names. I don't because they're not memorable, which is really sad because I really want to root for them. And I really want these stories to be brought to life and all of the stuff, but it's just missing that extra little sparkle, I guess,
Yeah.
to make them relatable and make you root for them and love them and make it 3D. And I think that's the biggest thing is these stories need to have a little bit more depth to them. And if you add depth to the male character, I think that's it. I think that'll help and then it'll push the plot way more than it does simply because you can see how the male character as a person is pushing and helping the female, not just him being this two-dimensional cardboard cutout.
Well, those are the 5 tropes or traits that we noticed in books this year that we absolutely hate. So let us know in the comments what tropes you don't like seeing in your books. Recommend some of your favorites to us so we can always add to our never-ending TBRs. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.